Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll get underway with the investor webinar with Akkure right now. So thanks very much for joining us. We've got a great session lined up for you today. I see Oran has just flicked his camera on there, so I'll do an introduction properly in a second, Oran. But I'd just like to go through a couple of things first of all with you. As hopefully you will have seen over the last number of weeks and months, that the caliber of the clients that the companies that we're getting onto the platform is very high, and last year we managed to do a very good job of getting all of them over the line, which was great, which was great news. And Akkure is just another example of that high caliber companies that we're getting onto the platform. You will have seen that that Akkure got fully funded within 3 days of launching the campaign. We launched it on Friday of last week, and by Sunday it was fully subscribed. But of course, it's overfunding, and Oran will talk a little bit more about that as well a little later on. Akkure have agreed to open up to extend the campaign to accommodate more Spark investors, and hopefully we'll see a little bit more money coming into the campaign as later on today. We're working with other companies who are equally exciting as well, and we'll have those on the platform very shortly as well. But today is all about Spark. Sorry, today's not about Spark. Today's all about Akkure, and so I'd like to introduce you to Professor Oran Rigby. Oran is the CEO of Akkure, and we have a presentation as we always do. So, Oran, if you'd like to share your screen, and you can get straight into your presentation, if you would.
Sure, Chris. Yeah, absolutely. You can hear me okay there?
Yeah, absolutely. It's perfect.
Great. Okay. And you should see my screen now as well.
We can as well. So I'll switch my camera off, Oran, and away you go.
Great. Look, first of all, welcome, and again, thanks for the opportunity and indeed your interest in listening to what I have to tell you about Akkure and the opportunities, I suppose, that we're hopefully offering here. Akkure, what we've developed here is a digital and AI-powered platform that at its heart matches patients with groups, and indeed even more so groups of patients with relevant clinical trials. And it does this using a host of what's called natural language processing AI, so matching the profiles of those patients with the profiles, the inclusion and exclusion criteria. But even more so, what we're actually building is the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure for the next generation of clinical trials. And the next generation of clinical trials will be both virtual and precision. And they're two key pieces here and concepts. Virtual, and everyone's familiar with virtual now, with what we're doing now is virtual. The COVID era has really rapidly transformed that era of the tyranny of distance no longer counting. It's all about digital networking, digital engagement. And that's virtual trials are doing the same thing. But related to that is the opportunity with precision trials. And precision trials effectively read genomic, and that's genetics. We all have our DNA, and the DNA obviously is personalized, and we can actually start now recognizing patients and disease at a personalized or genomic level. So what Akkure is doing is matching not only the actual clinical profile of patients, but also combining that with the genomic profile and actually creating patterns or cohorts of patients, so collectives of groups of patients with certain diseases at a very granular level, which will allow for the development of a whole new era of precision therapeutics. And that's what's around the corner. We're now entering the era of intelligent medicine. We've moved on from the era of the age of information and rapidly now into the age of medical intelligence, that fourth era of industrial modern medicine. And what we're really doing here is building that infrastructure to future-proof us for the ability to really take that opportunity for this precision virtual trials. So the problem that we're trying to address here is that 85% of clinical trials don't enroll enough patients. So recruitment is probably the single biggest issue. And it's also an issue that is often the most funded in many ways. And the fact that on average of €8,000 to €8,500 per patient is paid for commercially sponsored trials because of the need to get these targeted cohorts and collectives of patients on board. There's up to 60 billion US dollars spent on trials every year. And indeed, much of that money is actually wasted. There's a massive analog process involved that's not digitalized. There's no efficiency there. Most trials are still used in pen and paper with in-person consultations and follow-up. We want to digitalize that. We want to virtualize that. And then we want to take it to not just the current level of clinical trials, but the next level, which is that personalized precision level. CROs, the likes of Icons and stuff, are paid almost 40 billion to these organizations to try and recruit patients, but not only to recruit them, the second key piece here is retention. And you'll see, for an example, that about only 5% of cancer patients are involved in clinical trials. What that means is a massive opportunity cost. 95% of patients with cancer are not in trials. So we're not capturing the data on those patients, and we're therefore not being able to use that data to create new, personalized, powerful therapeutics. And this is an area that again is becoming more and more focused on, and that's the level of cancer genomics, looking at the cancer itself, not just the genomics of the patient, and trying to get targeted new drugs at that. So if you think about it, right now, there's about 18,000 cancer trials currently running in the States. And even then, that's only 5% of patients. So I mentioned the other big problem is retention. Retention, about 40 to 60% of trials on average, people in trials drop out of trials. So that's the retention piece. And obviously this causes a whole host of problems with the validity of the trial, ultimately costing hundreds of millions again in a problem. So the problem is real, the problem is major, and the problem is global. And really that's where the opportunity lies in terms of commercial sense. So there's multiple pharmaceutical companies who are developing new cures, new therapies, not just currently, but also when you look at your COVID vaccines as an example of that new cure or preventative piece. But it's all about getting these speed to market as well. And the virtual care aspect of this is what's really going to just light the fuse on this whole opportunity. Virtual care and telemedicine itself has been transformed in the last 12 months. If you look at this, probably something like 10 billion has been put into invested in telemedicine companies. We're looking at teletrials, a very niche part of this, but also a massive market in itself, and one of the few companies doing this. A key example of virtual trials, the era of virtual trials is if you take what Apple did there about a year ago, they took on board 15,000 patients just using their Apple app in terms of looking at someone's heart rate. Previously, it would take around 2 or 3 years to recruit that number of patients. So it's this era and this opportunity, the digitalization of trials that we're really taking part in. So the solution that we have is all about increasing the efficiency of recruitment and retention of patients. And for the last 6-7 years, I've been involved in digital health companies and leveraging technology, particularly AI, in the healthcare sphere. And the two things Akkure focuses on is automation and personalization. Automation being that ability to scale using AI, efficiencies, speed, and I suppose precision. So the precision piece is the personalization piece. And that's that each individual patient, you can actually find a solution for them based on their own specific set of circumstances and disease, and then leverage that with collectives of other patients like them. Effectively brokering or advocating on behalf of these groups of patients, creating an influence, allowing them influence the direction of clinical trials, giving them a say in effectively patient-centric or patient-led clinical trials. So what we try and do is reward both patients and indeed their advocates in the form of doctors to bring patients on board, to make them aware even that there's trials out there that are matched for them, that they might be suitable for. And not just at a local level in, say, Cork, Galway, Dublin, but at a virtual. So therefore, you remove the tyranny of distance, you become a global opportunity of digital health data sharing. So we have a number of streams of revenue there that opens up the opportunity for. But ultimately, the big payers here are the vastly wealthy pharmaceutical companies who pay Akkure and who in turn remunerate and try and incentivize patients and doctors to help patients allow access to their data. And that's the key piece here. We don't take their data. It's all about building the infrastructure to allow patients share their data as they consent to do so. So really, it's an enabler. It's a digital infrastructure enabling patients to share their data with big pharma to create new trials and cures. And there's literally people dying for cures out there. The business model I alluded to beforehand is probably 4 big streams there, but we've kind of modeled this, and we feel there's genuine opportunity here at quite conservative estimates over the next 3 to 5 years of tens of millions of revenue. Our key revenue streams is probably 4 big ones. We see this a premium or freemium type model whereby we can automate clinical teletrial consultations and use our natural language processing to update dynamically both the patient's profile, and based on that, update them with a recommended top 10 trials suited for you. So this is a real value add service for individual patients, but also for groups of patients and charities, and by extension, insurance groups, payers, doctors, a whole host of people. The other piece, and genomic analytics, this is really the recruitment fee of getting patients into trials, and not just in individual patients, as we said, but it's cohorts. So you combine the individual power of your individual data is quite limited, but when you group that with patients and others like you, it becomes very powerful. So the ability to recruit that fee, the average fee, as I said, about €8,500 per patient recruited. And we take that and share that amongst the people who are actually contributing that data. Equally, that whole big data analytics, again, with express permission of patients, we allow them to share that data and be rewarded for sharing that. So that gives insights for pharma who are looking for these targets, these collectives, to create new therapeutics, targeted precision therapeutics for these. And then ultimately, there's also the 4th piece, which in some ways is the most exciting piece, is the teletrial consultation. So using a process called RPA, or robotic process automation, you could automate and triage and e-triage the consultations, but not just using telemedicine, where at this stage there's a number of companies out there doing telemedicine. They've all come into their own in many ways, but most of them are just very simple Skype for doctor, and you'd be probably familiar with one of those. I won't mention any names, but we've taken to the next generation of telemedicine, teletrial consultations. If you look at the market in the UK alone, there were 780,000 individuals on clinical trials last year. That's not the States, which is 15 times that, the UK alone. Now, each of those 780,000 patients had probably monthly, if not bi-weekly follow-up, all done manually with a person, with a nurse, with a doctor. You can automate that whole process. So there's millions of consultations you could automate and do remotely. So there's a massive opportunity there as well. We've had quite an exciting journey over the last 12 to 18 months, and we've really made some massive validations on the road, and really the traction we're seeing now is kind of overwhelming in some ways. We're building out a prototype as part of a DTIP with some of our consortium partners. Now we won a 6.3 million contract, effectively, or grant, with Ireland's Digital Transformation and Innovation Fund, of which we brought together both Microsoft, which was an incredible achievement, that they were excited to work with a company at our early stage, but also one of the leading clinical companies in the world, effectively college of surgeons, the RCSI, Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, backed up by an IT company called Ergo, again, very expert in infrastructure and IT as well. So the 4 of us successfully won this grant for 6.3 million, which we feel we have the rights to commercialize. That's very important. Akkure holds those commercialization rights. About a year ago at this stage, we validated with over 100,000 consultations our MedBot, which was a COVID MedBot, which we licensed to 360 different pharmacies throughout Ireland, 15 different chains, including Uniphar, the largest by far commercialization chain in Ireland for pharma, to use this bot, which people could just effectively look at the impact of COVID and the risk of attracting COVID. And that drew quite a lot of media attention a year ago. We were also just awarded the HSE Health Innovation Hub to look at a number of pilots there. So lots of things happening, lots of opportunities happening with our core tech. Briefly moving on to the marketing and sales strategy, we see a couple of key parallel verticals here in distribution, if you will, angles. Not only a B2C through consumers, direct to consumers, but also going B2B2C, in other words, business to consumer, being via hospitals and pharmacy groups. So the direct to patients we see through patient charities and groups of patients. There's countless charitable groups on Facebook, and all of these pieces are really chat forums So we're leveraging off that to actually contact them and say, look, actually, it's all very well talking, but let's do something. Let's actually enact this. Let's create the power of the infrastructure you have here, use ours to now do something for you and your patient cohorts. Equally, we've had some exciting conversations with the 15 pharmacy groups we already partnered with a year ago to look at using our latest version of our MedBot, which is what we call the trial bot, which is a quick interface. It's around 2 or 3 lines of code that they can integrate into their website. So no disruption for them. They have this trial bot, and what this is a value-add service that now patients can find trials themselves, not having to pay anything, just come on board. And why is that important? Well, community pharma we see as a key and disruptive and new innovative way of getting new patients on board, because people go to pharma because they need pharmacies, because they need medications, prescriptions. They need prescriptions because they have conditions, medical conditions. 2 out of 5 people in Ireland have chronic conditions. So we know who they are. They can identify themselves, and they can actually identify trials that will help them find new cures and new therapies and be part of the solution, that patient-centric piece. And finally, then, that there's the hospital networks and that capacity for individual specialists, oncologists, neurologists, whatever those specialists might be able to use the software we're providing to actually identify at scale their patients that might be able to match to X amount of trials. So not only identify one patient, but say I've got 1,000 patients, I'm an oncologist, and I can now see, hey, well, 30% of these patients go for these top 3 trials. And that's why we were so excited to have Professor John Crown, probably arguably Ireland's leading oncologist, and certainly the leading trial expert in Ireland, join our group only the last few weeks as the chair of the Medical Research Advisory Board. And what John brings is not to mention his own immediate patients, but the network into the US. He has an unparalleled network of senior oncologists and senior trial experts there. So this is how you'll get not just 1 or 2 patients at times, but major cohorts of patients in the oncology vertical, rare diseases vertical, a whole host that basically come on board because we're creating the infrastructure. We're not owning them. We're not owning their data. We're allowing them use their data with patients like them to create new cures for them. So I think that's a really important philosophy. Look, our team, very briefly, is myself. I'm both an associate professor of robotics and autonomous systems, as well as being a consultant in intensive care medicine and surgery. This is Amy Rigby, who's medical director, over 15 years of senior experience, a lung transplant specialist, and Elaine Kenny, director of genomics, and I mentioned then Professor John Crown as well, down in St. Vincent's. In the competition, look, there's certainly people out there who are doing or trying to do similar things to what we're doing, but they don't have all those elements. One of the leading pieces, probably Nebula Genomics, is worthwhile looking at just to understand the space a bit more. Nebula Genomics, for example, use blockchain to enable patients to upload their genomic data, but they don't find trials. They can't find trials. They don't have home testing kits to capture that samples, and they don't have telemedicine, automated teletrial, and a whole host, a digital suite of AI that we use to empower people. So lots of companies with one aspect of this. There's 23andMe, there's even there's a couple of companies in Ireland, which some of you may be know, GMI and a few others like this, who try and capture data and sell data to third parties on your behalf. We don't do any of that. It's all about keeping the holistic piece, the number of elements that we bring together into one platform. I don't think there's anyone out there realistically who's doing that now, including in the States, despite some of these companies raising significant, like multiples in terms of what we've raised in the crowdfunding piece, multiples like that, who still only have 1 or 2 elements of what we're offering. So look, I suppose at this stage, why invest? We've had this long conversation as to should we be even continuing to look for funding at this stage. We've kind of beaten all the records, and there's been a lot of excitement in terms of that 3-day piece where we went to 700,000 and kind of 140% of what we had hoped to invest. But we've kind of talked through this, and we said, look, we should keep people the opportunity and leave this open. But why would you invest? Well, this patent protected technology, I can talk more on that later, that this major global opportunity to be the next stage of precision virtual trials, a very robust and an omni revenue model. We have part of already received a non-dilutive grant of over 1 million as part of that DTIF. And again, that 6 million project, we have commercialization rights to that, but that's the icing on the cake. There's obviously the tax rebate, 40% for any investors on this crowdfunding platform. We've no debt at all in the company. And really our team, including ex-Microsoft, We've got a few guys just come on board from S3. You know, there's some of the top talent in health tech and IT in Ireland is now joining the team in the last month. And that's without the funding that we've managed to secure with the help of Spark and the investors here. So I think a really exciting time, a really exciting opportunity. A quick word on our exit strategy before maybe I open the floor to questions back to Chris. We feel there's, you know, definitely in terms of an exit, this will be an acquisition target. For a range of reasons, the proprietary technology, the major opportunity in terms of growth in this area, and the scalable platform. And there's a number that's probably the likes of your big tech in terms of the Verilis, the Amazons, the Microsoft, all of whom are building and want to get access into this area. There's the farmers themselves, the Roche, the Pfizers, and the icons of this world who are always trying to solve for digitalization and transformation of the clinical trial space. We feel, you know, these are companies that are always on the acquisition for high tech companies like ourselves. So look, there's the contact details. I might hand back over to Chris actually, and to see if there's any questions from the audience that we can address.
Oran, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, we've got loads of questions that are flying in. So Fergal's there as well. So so we'll get cracking into those. So Fergal, do you have the first one there, please?
Thank you very much, Chris. Yeah. So
but sorry, Fergal, before you start, can those people who put their questions in the chat, can they put them in the Q&A, please, so that we've got them all lumped together? And then we can go through those. But we've had a few questions that came in before the webinar started, but we'll have a look through those, and then we'll go on to the ones that have come in live as well. And then if any questions we haven't managed to answer in the time that we've got allocated, then we'll follow those up with written Q&A, and we'll post those onto the campaign, onto the Akkure campaign. But anyway, Fergal, after you.
Perfect. Loads of questions in here. So Oran, just a quick one on the actual clinical trial itself. Can patients go directly to yourselves to seek clinical trials, or do they need to be referred by their doctor or consultant?
No, absolutely. Patients can use this, and I kind of alluded to the strategy we had there beforehand, which is quite, you know, disruptive in its own right, of actually empowering patients to find trials themselves and giving them the tech and the tools, the easy UX, the interface to do that. And one of the key ways we do that is obviously on the Akkure site itself, but we're really leveraging the strategy of bots, which we used so successfully in the COVID MedBot campaign we had there back in March, is looking at putting these, we call them the trial bots, so that easy 1 or 2 lines of code that can be integrated into any website at all, which allows people give their data, give their conditions, give their drugs, effectively create that profile and bring them onto the Akkure site then to have that list of recommendations. So I think that's a key disruptive way of bypassing and empowering maybe patients to try and find those trials themselves. And I think it's a very easy way. It's a cheap way, that it's only a couple of lines of code. So even for what we see as charitable websites can use this. So patient cohorts can use this, where they can actually use this as a value-add tool, as a service effectively for the patients to do that themselves. So yes, whilst clearly we're looking directly to recruit patients via hospitals, network hospitals, and doctors themselves, I think it's important equally to empower patients and patient groups to find those trials and to get involved with their data on the infrastructure we provide.
Brilliant, excellent.
Very good. Question here from Stephen. Will you continue practicing as a surgeon, or will you be spending most of your time with Akkure?
Look, I mean, I think that's a fair question. People are always worried about, you know, are you 100% into this? Are you 100% committed? And I think yes, absolutely. At the same time, I would still intend practicing part-time, and that's in a very limited role clinically. And the reasons for that is that credibility with clinicians, with doctors, is incredibly important. And doctors have rightly or wrongly, when they're engaging with their clinical peers, there's a much more openness and respect and credibility there. When you entirely leave that clinical domain, it's harder to not only have that credibility piece, but also there's the networks. And I mean, you know, Professor Crown is a perfect example of that. Even myself, since I've come back to Ireland after spending about 15 years in Australia, those new networks I've developed since working at St. Vincent's, since working Beacon, they've really managed to open so many doors. So I think it's important to maintain that credibility as a practicing clinician, albeit, you know, I'm kind of working currently 40 to 60 hours a week on Akkure. And I think that's something I continue to commit to, absolutely. Yeah.
Very good, thanks.
Good. And one here regarding the US, you mentioned it, and obviously the size of the market. What's required to become the market leader in there? You know, what hires do you need to make? You know, what steps need to be made in the company?
Look, I think the hires are a part of a kind of a second stage recruitment, almost a Series A type piece, in terms of launching the States. That's a massive market, and that actually is effectively what we're raising for now. Is to use these funds to really massively accelerate to the stage. We'll be looking at doing a Series A in the next 12 to 18 months with a view to targeting what is our target market, the US, where the clinical trials market, the patient empowerment market, is so much, I suppose, bigger and more mature, and where patients are much more concerned with their own health and welfare, and mainly because a lot of the time they can't afford healthcare that we actually have here. So you need to take more responsibility for that. I think part of what the roots to success, the key to success, again, comes back to the critical mass, the patient recruitment, that retention piece, and I think those roots to success, I've kind of touched on them in the profile in the presentation, but they're direct to patients, you know, through either individually or through charitable groups and patient advocacy groups, because again, the power of is the collective here. We're really harnessing the collective and letting patients influence trials and engagement. The second piece is as an extension of that is the pharmacy groups. And this is, you know, no one just doing this. Is a very much disruptive model that we've developed with our pharmacy partners. I mean, we're currently in quite high-level discussions with both Boots and Uniphar, two of the biggest outfits, and clearly these have connections in the States again. And why? Because we have those value-add service, that easy trial bot piece, and that personalized engagement with the patient ongoing. So you create that relationship, not just a one-off. And then finally, I suppose it's those networks of hospitals. So hospitals in the States tend to be about 70% of hospitals are in networks. So you have the likes of Northwell Health, 36 hospitals, Kaiser Permanente, 100 hospitals, groups of hospitals, each of which themselves have hundreds of doctors and hundreds of thousands of patients. And this is where the likes of the expertise and the networks, again, the clinical network, that expertise that the doctors bring, their own peer networks, and indeed that Prof Crown really brings in abundance to ready-made networks to distribute this at scale. So I think they're the routes to success. We know what they are. Now we just need the resources to execute those.
Excellent.
Okay, question in from Fiona. You have 4 revenue streams, but which is likely to produce the most?
Look, I think I kind of touched on them before. I think the initial piece is that recruitment piece, the trial recruitment piece. But I think longer term, what really excites me is the retention piece, is that teletrials aspect, and also, the big data piece where you can actually empower people, encourage people, or incentivize people to share their data to create something bigger than themselves, but rewarded for doing that as well. Because it's that data that pharma need, and at the moment their model of doing it is give me the data, I hold on to it, and you get it no more. But we're really trying to disrupt that whole piece and put the patient and their advocates in the form of doctors in the driving seat, not big pharma. I think that's really disruptive, and that involves patience.
Very good.
Excellent. Question here from Barry, just regarding the DTIP grant. So what was involved in winning that, or what was the timeline? Was it a challenge that you do again, or is there other grants as well, even out there that may?
No, look, there are grants, and that involved a hell of a lot of irritation and hard work, actually. We won that over a year ago. And that'll tell you how long, and we're only just actually signing things now. So it's a great initiative. There's no doubt about that. I think the devil's in the detail, like everything. I think it was a major coup bringing along the caliber of the consortium that we managed to bring together. The College of Surgeons, Microsoft themselves, their whole push for AI for good in healthcare. And really, I think that's another piece I haven't talked about, but our partnership as an ISV or independent software vendor that we're accredited with Microsoft, they're pouring resources into us, even in terms of their engineers, to help us leverage some of their AI. I think that's really exciting as well. So there's a whole host of credits. We've almost a $250,000 in credits that we don't pay server fees on. We're saving on that for the company as well, because Microsoft for startups have backed us. So that's a really important piece. But no, look, the grant itself, great to have it, but I see it as a nice to have. I think there's non-dilutive cash there with lots of strings attached. Some of that can be distracted from the focus in hand. But I think what it's brought to the company is that credibility. It's that, you know, big players in the space recognizing what we have in terms of the technology and the team. But it's also the likes of, you know, the connections and development you make with college of surgeons and their global reach through the Middle East and Asia as well, and the clinical trial opportunities we can you know, empower them with, irrespective of the DTIF. The DTIF, as I said, is a cherry on top. It's the blockchain element. It's a nice to have, not a need to have. But would I do it again? I'm not sure. It's it took years out of me.
Yeah.
Question here from Sean is how easy would it be for someone to copy the platform?
I think, in short, incredibly difficult. Single elements, absolutely. Look, you know, tech, reverse engineering, you know, there's lots of engineers out there, you know, especially with enough resources who could reverse engineer this. But that's exactly what they need: lots of resources, lots of time, lots of skills, and lots of brains. I think there's large barriers ultimately to creating a platform like this. There's the technology itself. And it's not just those lines of coding a UX, it's the design, and it's the integration of the patents that we have in terms of the AI APIs, in terms of the quantum consoles, that the teletrials piece. And then there's the hardware components. The patent we have, the world's first patent for genomic sampling, and that's another whole piece. It's almost a company in and of itself. The ability that when you give a sample of saliva, all these home testing kits we're seeing for COVID, the ability to recognize that I gave that sample, not the dog, or not, you know, great Granny Mary, whatever that might be. And we've patented that, and we've got a patent out there, and we're developing that with our partners and design partners. So that's a really exciting piece in and of itself. So there's the software, there's the hardware, but then there's also the team. I mean, you need deep domain expertise here in medicine, in genomics, in any one of those areas, to bring those all together into a cohesive, commercially ready unit. Gosh, I don't know. You good luck to them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is something that you kind of alluded to when we've had discussions before, that the market is so immense that, you know, even if there are other players, then yeah, so be it. There's still enough room for everybody.
And look, I think that's very true. I mean, this is you know, this is a global market. It's a digital market. It's a pharmaceutical trials market. The rate of increase in the GDPR is just, you know, it's just scaling every year. And where things are going in terms of that precision therapeutics, it's been covered now by Forbes, by National Geographic. It's this incredibly exciting area that hasn't even been tapped yet, but it's coming. And that's the piece that gets us really excited.
Very good.
Excellent. A lot of questions here on the exit, or just on the time frame. Maybe something around the multiples as well. So if you could just maybe just cover off a little bit of how you see an exit, in what time frame, and you know, you mentioned obviously the targets that would be looking at an acquisition.
Look,
I
think time frames are, you know, they're kind of high. It's kind of crystal ball gazing to a certain extent, but I think realistically 3 to 5 years is that kind of, you know, that bigger exit to the time you get to that scale, to where we're really you know, that acquisition target. I already alluded to the big players in the space who are, you know, very cash rich, rapidly expanding, and, you know, scaling in these verticals that we're in, be that the teletrials, be that genomics, be that digital health, be that wearables, all of these buzzwords, AI, you name it, we tick these boxes. So it's almost a buzzword acquisition, if nothing else. I think multiples, again, hard enough to look at, but if you look at other digital health companies in this space, you're talking 7 to 10 times revenue at a conservative estimate. And in the last years, that's actually blown out to 14 plus. If you look at CB Insights, actually have done some really nice data on this in terms of digital health companies, clinical trial companies, even genomics companies, or kind of across all that. So those multiples are eye-watering. And you know, who are those players? I think I mentioned them already. So there's are we looking at exiting at this stage? Not at all. Our focus is really at this stage building the team, optimizing the platform, and commercializing it, with a very clear view to launching into the States in 12 months' time. So we're not looking at, you know, what we have here is, you know, dragging it on over 2 or 3 years. This is fast, aggressive expansion, and that's what we're looking at, you know, doing with the cash raised.
Very good, very good. We've got more questions than we'll have time to ask here, but listen, we'll crack on for a couple more minutes. But question in here, and where's it gone? Why did you choose the crowdfunding route as opposed to trying to raise money with private or VC money?
Well, we met Spark serendipitously, actually, so it just seemed like a great fit. We actually had never even considered crowdfunding until we actually were made aware of this, and having a chat with Chris and his team, it seemed to really align with the values that Akkure stands for. And I suppose we built on three fundamental values. I talked about, you know, how any health company or tech I've been involved in has always looked at automation and precision, but the principles that we kind of have are threefold. And one is that democratization of data. And I think people are increasingly aware of that with the Cambridge Analytica, you know, the selling of data to third parties and how unethical that is. And people now realize that, you know, people were selling their DNA for pictures of cats on Facebook. This is the trade-off. It was like a land grab. So you've got to own your data. The democratization of that is incredibly important. And the other principle is shared value. So it's yes, this is a for-profit company, absolutely, but it's doing something that we think is a societal good, and you're empowering people to do something in that value space. And the shared value means that everyone benefits: the doctors, the pharma, the patients. It's not just, you know, one company takes all the money and runs, as sometimes happens in clinical trials. It's actually empowering everyone to be part of that. And if everyone shares the value, then everyone wins. So that's the second piece. And the third kind of principle we have is communities and charities, that we've got to bring them in at the grassroots. And that's why we went the crowdfunding route, because we felt there was so many people out there who want to be part of this. We felt, well, look, let's bring them on the journey, both for commercial reasons, because clearly it makes sense to have a grassroots, a community of people who are zealots, who actually want to push you forward because they know the value you bring to them and their communities. I think that's what crowdfunding offers. It offers people who see this, who actually are you know, individually engaged in the journey and in the success of what we're doing. So they're your best army for marketing this themselves. So commercial, that made sense, but equally, principally, we want them to be part of owning this next generation of infrastructure. It's patient-centric, so, you know, we'd like to do this again on a bigger scale, you know, with given success.
Very good.
Excellent. A question here, Oran, just regarding the participation, the actual patients within the clinical trial. Yep. What's the cost to acquire those? What rewards are they getting back? You know, and I suppose, are the doctors also rewarded or remunerated as well?
Look, I mean, I think it goes back to that shared value model that you know, there's principal investigators. We see there's almost a trifecta of stakeholders in the clinical trials industry. There's pharma themselves. They're looking for doctors in the form of principal investigators, researchers, experts in that field, be that multiple sclerosis, be that neurology, be that melanoma, whatever those fields are. They need to find those PIs to help conduct these trials. But equally, they need to find patients, because patients, without trials, you can't do clinical trials, and therefore you can't create new drugs and new cures without patients. Patients equally are looking for trials that they can actually be part of. Why? Not really for the pure incentives financially, but the remuneration in terms of the rewards of access to therapies they couldn't otherwise get. And we're talking life-saving drugs here. I mean, literally, people are still dying looking for cures. And you have to empower them to find that cure, bring them together with others, share that data, and use AI to uncover insights in the genome that uncover, again, unknown targets even. So I think that's the philosophy. That's the opportunity, I suppose, as well.
Very good, very good. Okay, listen, time's coming up, so I'll ask one more question, and that is, you say that Series A will be required in 12 months or so, but do you think you'll need another round after that, or will that be sufficient for you to grow enough to make the market?
Look, I mean, the States is a big market, and the prize is incredibly big, and that involves, you know, external investment, basically, I think, to get to where you want. And it's not just investment in terms of money, it's smart money. It's picking those investors who are aligned and who have something to add value. I think, to answer your question, will a Series A, invariably, I would think it will be a symptom of success. If we get to that level, I think that's a sign of success, that we actually require this, because not because we're looking, you know, we're cash poor, but because the opportunities is there, and it's almost virgin blue sky. So yes, I think that is is the case. When that will be, it's hard to say. That our focus is really on the next 12 months and securing that Series A to get into the States. But I think the multiples that you'll be looking at that stage, you know, you just have to look at the other companies that are out there in this space to get some idea of where the value of this investment might go very quickly.
Very good. Okay. Well, listen, guys, I know we haven't got to all of the questions that have been asked, but what we'll do, as we always do, send them on to Oran to be answered by hand, and we will publish those on the campaign later today or tomorrow. And the recording of this will also be on our YouTube sites very shortly as well. So you can go back and have a look at that and listen to those answers again at some stage. But I think we'll wrap up for today. But Oran, thank you very much indeed for your presentation. Well done on that. And Fergal, thanks very much for asking those questions too. And everybody else for joining us. And we will have some more new clients upon the site very soon. We're talking to a number of different companies in different kind of verticals as well. MedTech again in another a couple of occasions, but some other very, very nice businesses. So please do look out for those. So thanks very much again, and we'll see you all again soon. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.